Hi there. Welcome to the first edition of Sage Advice from the gardening experts at the Bruce Company. And I'm Lisa Briggs and
I'm Gail Stroh.
And Gail and I have been noticing that a lot of you are doing new gardening projects this year. And we thought that it would be really fun if we had a live Facebook and you could ask us your questions and we could answer them. And in the meantime, we're going to talk about some topics that we have seen as people come into the garden center, into the plant desk with questions. So first, I think we're going to talk a little bit. Gail is from a farming family. And so Gail, your family's been farming for generations?
Well, we have. I grew up on a small dairy farm in Wisconsin, southeastern Wisconsin, and that's a lot of work. But I learned a lot about not only gardening, but just plants in general from working outside on the farm. And then was fortunate enough to go to UW and I have a degree in horticulture and egg education. So worked in a number of different horticultural fields, both garden centers and some other things. So yeah, we'd like to be able to pass on all that knowledge and information to you and work with you and make you successful at that.
And I will say that Gail just got recognized last week at our team meeting, our team leader meeting, because she has been at the Bruce Company for 20 years. So there's a vast amount of experience. I don't do a lot of vegetable gardening. I have a small house, small yard with very limited sunshine. So I do most of my veg gardening in pots or in a small raised bed. But that just goes to show you that anybody can garden, veg garden, no matter how big or small your garden is. And so you should ask questions. So you can comment on the Facebook comment section. And when the questions come in, we will answer them. And if we don't get to them by the time we sign off, just keep on asking because we can answer them offline. Right. So what's our first topic, Gail?
Well, I see that we have a lot of questions on blossom end rot on tomatoes and vegetables.
We have a ton on TV that we do and the radio as well.
Right. And that is a physiological problem. It's actually not fungal. A lot of people think it's a fungus, but it's not. It's actually a problem that's related to water and calcium uptake in many plants, such as tomatoes is the one that's most common on. And so what happens is when the plant is growing rapidly, it doesn't always move the calcium around to all of the plant parts that need it, such as the developing fruit. And so some people will see a black end on the tomato fruit that's growing, and they think that it's a disease, which it looks awful, and it kind of disfigures the fruit. So basically, it just means that not enough calcium is going to the developing end of the tomato. So what we can do to help it is by applying a spray, a calcium spray, such as this one.
Right.
It's basically just applying calcium to the developing parts of the plant, the new growth and the fruits.
So you spray it right on the plant.
Right on the fruits and the new bud growth, and it will provide enough calcium to help relieve that blossom end rot. Now, if you see some of that on your tomatoes now, if they have that black end on them, you might want to throw those away, pick them off and throw them away. But by applying this, it should help any additional developing fruits.
I have noticed myself that a lot of us do our vegetable gardening in containers, and it seems to be a bigger problem in containers because you're using potting soil, which doesn't come with a lot of nutrients.
Right, and the other thing that happens in containers is the moisture level can fluctuate more easily than in the ground. So you try and keep them consistently moist. So watch the watering in the pots. In the ground, you can do things like mulching to help keep a little bit more consistent moisture level.
You can mulch your pots too.
Right, you can. That would also help in the containers. So keeping a consistent moisture level will help, but also making sure that you have a ready source of calcium for all those newly developing parts.
Now, is there anything that you can put in the plant when you're planting it, like calcium, like a fertilizer? Yes, like a fertilizer.
Absolutely. You want to make sure that when you are using a fertilizer for vegetables like tomatoes, zucchini, peppers, because those all could be susceptible to this, that your fertilizer has a certain small percentage of calcium. It doesn't need a lot.
Okay.
And even your soil may have adequate levels, but it does help to use a fertilizer that has calcium in it.
Yes. So if your tomatoes have that nasty little brown thing in them, then pick them off the plant, get them off, and then you could go ahead and apply the.
This is called Yield Booster, but there are other products out there that are specifically for the blossom end rot.
Perfect. Okay. Right. So what's our next topic? I know it is a year when fungus is among us.
Yes.
So we've been hearing a lot about powdery mildew and all kinds of leaf spots. Right. And it's not only on your vegetable plants, but also in your perennial beds and trees and shrubs.
Squash, you're seeing it on squash plants right now.
Yeah, a lot of times it's on peonies. Yeah, yes. A lot of squash plants get powdery mildew, right. And a lot of weird leaf spots. I would say on perennial plants, it's not that big a deal. You can treat and you should do a good cleanup, but it's not gonna kill your plant or harm your plant. It's just disfiguring.
Right.
But on vegetables, since they're so immediately growing and you want to get a harvest out of them, right. It is more important. So what is a good way to treat our vegetable plants that are getting fungal problems?
Well, what we've been recommending this year, there are many different options for fungicides that you can use to prevent it.
Yes.
It's always good to prevent it because once you have a fungus, you can't really necessarily cure it.
True.
But you can prevent it on the new growth or unhealthy growth. So we have, and I think it's on your side, the Revitalize.
Yes, it is on my side.
Revitalize is a little bit newer type of fungicide.
The price is right.
Yeah, there you go. And it's a beneficial bacteria, so it's organic. And when you spray this on, the good beneficial bacteria actually fight off the pathogens. And they destroy the pathogens, so they prevent the pathogen from creating the powdery mildew or the leaf spots or the downy mildew or all those types of things.
This is really effective.
It is, and it's organic, so it's very safe to use. And so I would say if your plants are looking pretty healthy or you are still getting new growth, it would be very helpful to apply something like this. I use it on my cucumbers, I use it on my squash, tomatoes for some of the tomato blights. And it really does help make a difference and prevent many of those fungus diseases. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I will say that this is a living thing. And so when you store it, like if you don't use it all, you don't want to store it in a place that's really hot. Or certainly if you have some left over and you want to use it next year, you're going to want to keep it not in your garage.
So it doesn't freeze.
Right. Put it in your poison monster cupboard, as I used to say to my kids.
There you go.
Someplace where it's safe and at a room temp, and that way it'll stay effective.
Yeah, and that has a 5-year shelf life. A lot of the earlier ones that were similar weren't very long lasting,
right.
So you only a year. You only got a year. This one has a 5-year shelf life, which is nice. So,
yes, but you got to store it properly.
Right, correct. So that's good. But there are other things that you can use. Some people still like to use sulfur. Neem does help as well. Neem, it will act as a fungicide if you can spray neem on your plants as well, and that will help keep them looking healthier longer.
And there are a whole slew of other fungicides too,
right.
like Daconil and the things that have been on the market for a long time. We just like
copper.
Yeah, the copper. We like the Revitalize because it's organic.
And it's newer. It's a newer technology, and it's a really nice concept, so that we're using a beneficial bacteria.
Yeah, excellent.
So,
okay. So
moving on,
we're going to talk about Gail's favorite thing. She's got some stories to share involving chipmunks and her baby watermelons.
But I think that's what it was.
Yeah. It sounds like a good story. But we've also had some questions on Facebook and some comments that people have been noticing damage to their plants that we don't think is insects and we don't think is disease related. I think that it's critter related.
We seem to have a real awful onslaught of animal problems this year. If you'll notice, people are telling us that they're having a lot of rabbits in their yard.
Yes.
I've had more rabbits in my yard this year, I think, than I've ever seen before. Obviously, if you live in the city, you don't have predators as much as maybe out in the country. But
we have a squirrel that sits by the patio door eating the black walnuts and teasing my cats.
Oh, well, then he's kind of a pet, right? Sort of a pet?
I don't know. I don't think the cats think he's a pet.
Well, and they can be pet-like except when they eat your garden stuff, and then they're not so pet-like. So there might be some humane ways to kind of chase them away or keep them. I mean, fencing obviously is a good way to prevent rabbits and things from getting into your garden and chewing too many things. But squirrels, chipmunks, and things like that will climb right over fences. So
right, and I've even heard that my sister who lives in Chicago had a big blue jay was digging in her pots and just pulling things out.
They'll do that, just because they're curious or they're just taking, So, I mean, the little animals like rabbits are probably the ones that we would use a repellent on. Right. And there are multiple types of repellents. Lisa's got one that is a granular repellent.
Right. So this is and we all have our favorites. Yeah. And we have a vast selection of different kinds of repellents. And if you ask different staff members, they will point you in different directions.
Right.
One is not better than the other. It's just that we all have our personal preferences.
Yeah. So for rabbits, I mean, there are a lot of products that will probably be helpful. I would, Liquid Fence makes animal repellent, rabbit repellent. This is a liquid one you would spray on. Repels-All makes a granular one you can sprinkle on. I found that one of the things you can do is do the boundaries.
That's
of the
what
area.
I do,
because
these are scent repellents.
Right.
And I think that if you put them right next to the plants,
maybe
the plants are so delicious and they're right there, and they're not going to pay any attention to the fact that they smell bad. So yeah, think of this as like a liquid fence.
Yeah. So that we don't want them to cross that barrier.
Right.
So if they can come up to it and smell it or taste, whatever, and they'll think, oh, this probably doesn't smell like a good area to go into. Maybe they'll go on to something else. So I've just found that is the most effective way for me, not only to spray the area, but the plants too is good, but just keep them out of the area totally.
And plus, like a lot of the sprays stain. Like I know that the Repels-All the Repels-All liquid stains. And so if you were spraying it on your hosta, for say, to keep the deer away, then you're staining your plants. And so that's why you want to do
flowers,
and that's why you want to use it like around the bed to keep them away.
And I've heard people say too that sometimes it will burn the flowers. You might not want to spray it directly on the flowers.
Right.
As far as being edible or dangerous, these are all organic ingredients, so they're not dangerous.
It's like rotten eggs and
but don't spray them on the parts of the plant you want to eat, because these don't wash off. They put an egg base in here, and that's what sticks it on like glue to the plants. So you will not be able to wash this off of the plants. So
and the liquids are gag inducing.
They're really
smelly. So close your windows, spray, and then go inside. Don't bring your gloves in, leave them outside. But in a couple of hours, the smell dissipates for humans. But
don't get it on your hands. It's really bad. It's hard to wash off. But one of the things too that I've heard is with chipmunks and squirrels, when we have dry conditions like we've had, they're more prone to take bites out of your things,
because they're thirsty,
like tomatoes and watermelons, which they did in my case. They went and took a bite out of every one of them,
and then bowled with them.
And then they bowled with them. So we had a nice little scene out in my garden. But sometimes if you can put just a small low pan or dish of water, you might keep them from biting on your vegetables, because if they find a source of water, they might leave them alone.
That's a good idea.
It's worth a try.
And doesn't hurt anything.
It doesn't hurt
Just
anything.
keep that washed out so you don't get algae or mosquito eggs in there.
So that's certainly worth a try.
Yeah. And we also, as well as the scent repellents that are made out of eggs and sulfur and that kind of stuff, we also have predator urines.
We do.
We just wanted to say that.
We're just going to show you this one too. The fox urine is a fairly effective deterrent for small animals like rabbits, and it smells pretty bad again. So I would say this would be a good perimeter treatment, to maybe keep them out of an area. But it does have a real strong scent, so just be careful where you use it.
And if you're lucky,
use it on the night of a party.
There you go.
Or a grill out, that would not be good.
Yeah, don't do that on Saturday afternoon.
That's right. So
wait till just before you go to work on Monday morning.
But some people really do like this.
Okay, so that's keeping critters away. And now, if you did have critters eating things in your garden and you want to start over again, or you had, say, peas and you've got some spaces, now is a perfect time to do some fall vegetable gardening. And so what kinds of things can we be planting now?
Oh, this is, now you could be seeding things like lettuce, spinach, cilantro. I put cilantro in every couple of weeks. If you want a good fresh supply of cilantro, you could be seeding it every couple of weeks throughout the whole season. Yeah. Either you love it or you hate it, right?
Yes, that is true.
So so lettuce definitely, and things like snap peas. You said you could probably put in snap peas, because peas can actually tolerate a light frost.
Yes.
So I know people are still planting maybe snap beans, but you have to get those in pretty quick, because they take probably 50, 60 days to mature.
So let's talk about how you figure that out. So on the back of a seed packet, there's all kinds of information about how the plant tastes, but there's also what they call days to maturity, and then days to germinate. And so you add those up, and you're going to come up with a number of days, say 60, because I think that this pack of beans is 54, and then a week to germinate. And our average first frost for our area is somewhere around between the 8th of October to the 15th of October. So you count back from there, and as long as your days are within that number, then you're good to go. So you could do like broccoli rabe, where you just do the florets and not the big heading stuff.
Yeah, there's some broccoli that I think that is a 45 day maturity. So
yes, and things like little baby radishes and small carrots. Yep, so there's time for lots of things, including my very favorite fall crop, which is garlic.
There you go.
Yes, I love garlic. Sometimes we do sell garlic in the spring with onion sets, and a lot of people do some spring garlic, but the fall planted garlic, I think, is the best.
It does get to be bigger, but now if you plant it in the fall, generally you're harvesting in the spring. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. So you plant usually after the first frost.
Right.
And then you're going to be harvesting, usually it's at the end of June or early July.
Right.
And it's really easy to do. You just plant the cloves and then cover it up and put a nice thick layer. I found a nice thick layer of like straw or some kind of insulating mulch. And then when they come up next spring, the leaves will come up and the scapes will come off. Yes. And you should cut the scapes off. Right. And those are super fancy, very culinary thing.
And it's rabbit resistant. The rabbits generally don't bother your garlic, so that's good. It's the first thing that comes up in the spring too. It's really early.
It is the most fun crop, super satisfying. And then you carefully dig them up, and each one of those cloves will make a great big head. Yeah. And I have to say, if you only eat garlic that you buy at the grocery store, you're in for a treat. Right now we have 6 different varieties. Yeah. And they have, some are sharper, some are really good for baking or roasting, and you will never go back to grocery store garlic again.
It's just you're right. It's a fun crop to grow, and it's very easy. And it's nice because you can put it in the fall and you don't have to worry about getting in a hurry in the spring to put it in because it's already there.
It's already done. Exactly.
So perfect. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
and then if we're still talking about seeding things, of course, now people are talking about grass, like their lawns.
Right.
And I'm going to let Gail talk about this totally because I have a teeny tiny lawn that I ignore most of the time. So, but fall is a good time to plant grass seed.
Usually we suggest to people this year have been seeding grass pretty much throughout the season, but grass seed's a little bit particular in as much as it likes cooler temperatures to germinate. If the temperatures are too warm, like maybe say above 85 degrees, sometimes grass seed won't even germinate, no matter how much water you're putting on. So now that the temperatures are starting to cool a little bit this week, we've noticed a little cooling effect.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. And so you can get ready to reseed those spots or thin areas in your lawn. Some people are going to have some dead areas. Maybe they're going to want to lightly rake out the dead grass or loosen the top layer of soil. Right. And so you could kind of mildly prepare. You don't have to till it up or totally, work up the area, but just lightly loosen the top layer of soil. Then you can put your grass seed on that area. Just a light coat. You just want to lightly see the grass on the ground. And I do suggest a starter fertilizer to be put on.
I was going to ask that. I did that in the spring, and I had much better luck with the new grass having a fertilizer.
Yes, it'll root better if you put a starter fertilizer on. And then if it's a bare area and you're putting new seed on a bare area, it's very helpful to put a mulch on that area as well. That can be anything from straw or hay, or we do have some pelletized mulches too, granular mulches.
That's the stuff you sometimes see you put it on and it's kind of green.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you water those and then they swell up and then they protect the seed and they hold moisture in. But once you have the seed down, you want to water this regularly. And that means probably every day. If it's really hot and windy, maybe twice a day, but generally once a day is about what you would want to do. Grass seed will germinate pretty quickly when the weather is warm and the soil is warm like it is.
Right.
And so by September, you should actually have a pretty nice area of grass growing by mid to late September.
And at what point do you put the mower on it?
I would say when it gets up, let's say it's going to take 2 to 3 weeks to germinate. Definitely in 2 to 3 weeks, you should have grass germinated. Then let it grow another week or so. You can back off on the watering a little bit when it starts to get a couple inches high. You're probably going to want to mow it when it gets to be about 4 inches high or so.
So you'd let it get a little higher than maybe you would in the rest of the place.
Yeah. If you get on there with mower too early, you're going to probably pull some of it out. And so I would let it get rooted in fairly well before you take a mower over it. But by the time it's 4 to 5 inches tall, you should be able to mow it.
Yeah.
So So that, I think this is an excellent time to get back to reseeding. You've got actually the whole month of September that you can seed. So I encourage people to think about that, within the next month and a half.
And as long as we're talking about lawns, if you have an established lawn and you want to help it go into the winter, what should we be doing to our lawns now for that?
Right. Grass will start to actually grow a little bit more now that the weather is cooler as well. So we could start to think about putting on some fertilizer toward the end of August, beginning of September. You actually have time for 2 more applications of fertilizer.
Okay.
And you'll know when we start to get more regular rainfalls and the grass starts to green up and start growing again. That's the time to get some fertilizer.
Are they 2 different products that we would be putting on if we put one on now and then a fall fertilizer later? Or is it the same thing?
Well, I would say generally we don't have phosphorus in the fertilizers anymore, other than starter fertilizers. But a fall fertilizer is maybe going to be a little bit lower in nitrogen, a little bit higher in the potassium, the N number. But you could certainly use a weed and feed if you wanted to.
Okay.
I would probably consider doing that maybe in September. And the last fertilizer application might want to go on probably late September, early October. So don't wait till it gets really, really cold. Get it on while the grass is still actively growing. So one application maybe late August, one early October. That would probably be about the last time you'd want to fertilize your grass.
Perfect.
So definitely time for growing a nice turf, in your backyard for fall use.
So we've got one more topic that we had planned. And, please, if you've got some questions, go ahead and type them in there if you're watching live, because we would love to answer. But we have been getting a lot of questions about raspberries, about things that are happening to people's raspberries, and also when to prune your raspberries. So raspberries come in sort of 2 types, and it's really easy to know which type you have because they either had fruit in July or they're fruiting now. And so if you have the ones that fruited in July, you have summer bearing berries. And those are kind of interesting because the cane comes up the first year, and then the second year that same cane will flower and fruit. And so when you're cleaning out your patch, you need to only remove the canes that had fruit on them and leave the others, because those are going to be the ones that have fruit next year. So a lot of people like to mow their raspberry patches back. That works really well if you have fall bearing berries or ever bearing berries, because those will flower and fruit the same year.
Right.
And so then you just mow the entire bed back, and then what comes up next spring will still bear fruit.
Right.
So kind of assess when your berries fruited, and that will give you a good clue as to when you should be cleaning out your bed. But it is Japanese beetle time, and we have been seeing a lot of complaints about Japanese beetles on raspberries and on fruiting things, and it's a little trickier with what you can spray. But Gail's got some really good sort of non-invasive ways for you to protect your patch.
There are 2 insects that seem to be causing some problems in raspberries. And the one that most people notice is the Japanese beetle issue. And they love the leaves once we get into July, and they also will infest the fruit.
Yeah.
So for Japanese beetles, it's hard with raspberries because they're so fragile. And the only thing that really is recommended to spray on them is a pyrethrin product, which is organic.
Right. And that comes from chrysanthemums.
Yes. And you can't spray that on. So what I tell people is, if I were going to use pyrethrin to control Japanese beetles, I would pick my fruit and then I would spray after you're done picking, because usually there's a day or 2 between harvests.
Read the package instructions.
Read the label
please.
Instructions. And so you could use pyrethrin to control them, and that will help. The other thing that I know the extension has recommended is a floating row cover.
I love those.
Yeah, this works pretty well. It's I use this on my blueberries. It's just a white fabric, a very lightweight white
like
fabric.
polyspun,
Right.
like a cloud.
Yeah, and it's so you can basically drape this over the plants, and you would probably need to kind of clip it on the bottom branches so it doesn't blow away.
Or use some bricks or something.
Right. But Japanese beetles tend to land on the very top, the most hot part of the plant, the most sunny part of the plant.
Sure.
And so if you cover most of the tops of the plant, generally you'll protect the berries, at least, from the Japanese beetles, because they don't always know to climb underneath. So if you protect the tops, this will do a pretty good job.
Right. And if you go that route, there are lots of other things that you can do with floating row covers.
Yes.
This spring was a perfect case because we had periods of really nice weather where things started to leaf out and get really tender. And then we had a stretch of really cold nights.
Right.
And floating row covers are what we use here in the garden center to cover all that stuff, because we don't possibly have enough room to bring all that stuff inside.
Right.
So they're great at sort of light frost protection too.
Right. And if you plant a number of these different fall crops, like we were talking about, most of the things like lettuce and spinach and radishes and peas can all handle light frost. So they can actually go beyond a frost. But if we're doing some things that are a little bit more sensitive, you can actually cover the row with a floating row cover.
Yeah, it would work in the fall.
It'll hold a few degrees of warmth underneath there. So it'll extend your harvest in the fall as well.
Tons of uses. You can use those all season long.
Can also be used for insect protection on things like squash, cucumbers. You have to remember, though, if you're draping this over to protect from insect damage on those plants, if you need pollination, you need to go out in the morning and lift it for a couple hours to allow the bees to get under the pollen.
Or you go out on your hands and knees with a paintbrush.
That's true.
And do a little bit of your own pollinating.
Yeah.
Nobody wants that.
Do you do that?
No, I don't have room for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, me neither. So, but anyway, that would be a couple ways of preventing insect damage and also protecting from frost damage on your plants. Okay.
Excellent. So this was really fun. And we're going to do this every 2 weeks. So the next date is September 1st. I don't know what our topic is going to be yet. So if you've got some things that you are interested in hearing us talk about, the experts at the Brews Company, it could be Gail, it could be Lori or Scott. We've got lots of people to bring in.
Right.
Comment. This will be up on our page afterwards, so you can watch it and then ask your questions. Then we're happy to answer for the next couple of days. Sure. So it is Brews Company Facebook page, and this is Be Live. So thank you for joining us and hearing some sage advice from the experts at the Brews Company. Oh, we have a question. Oh, yikes. Okay, so Taylor, what is the question? Because it's not up yet.
Why do basil leaves get brown?
Oh,
okay. That's Heidi. And I recognize Heidi because I am the Facebook moderator for the most part. And Heidi is on our Facebook page all the time. So hi, Heidi.
Well, basil a couple things can happen to basil. First of all, it can burn in the real hot sun. You can get some burning on the tops of the leaves.
And cold temperatures too.
And also Japanese beetles will eat basil, as we know. Basil is susceptible to downy mildew. When we start to get to this time of the year, when we have warm days and cooler nights, downy mildew, which is a fungal disease, can also affect basil plants. And you'll see that basil will kind of decline, and not only will the leaves get brown and yellow, but they can also drop off. If the leaves turn brown and start to drop off, it may be downy mildew. So it's a little tricky to try and, you could use Revitalize or some organic fungicide.
If their plants are, you got to catch it really early though.
Right, you'd have to do it prior to the point when you see that happening. But it may be that you're just seeing some browning from the sun scald on the leaves as well.
Does it downy mildew kind of makes the plants almost look like they're collapsing?
They do. They'll decline in a hurry if it gets downy mildew. That is true.
When impatiens get downy mildew, it's like the next morning you look out and your plants have like melted.
Yes.
It's really bad.
And keep that in mind because next year, or I know that they have some new disease-resistant downy mildew resistant basil plants that you might want to look for next year
and
too.
impatiens too, like somebody told me about.
Yes, because that is a devastating disease.
Yes, and people love impatiens in their shady yards.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
The other thing that helps though when you have fungal diseases in your garden is to do some crop rotation.
Right.
So if you garden in raised beds, you don't want to plant things that are in the same families, in the same place from one year to another.
Tomatoes would be a good example. If you can, put those in different spots from year to year, that would be really
And tomatoes also, you got to remember that tomatoes include potatoes and peppers, that whole sort of group. Yeah, so then you just have them here, and then next year you do them over here. And if you have squash, you just can kind of bounce things around, make a little diagram. Put it in your gardening notebook that we know you all have.
That's right.
So thanks, Heidi, for the question. And anybody else, Taylor? No?
Not this time.
Well, thank you, Heidi, for asking the question. And we are, like I said, we'll be back in 2 weeks on September 1st. And so if you've got topics in mind, let us know what they are. And
in the meantime, stop in and see us at the Bruce Company. We'd love to help you in the store, answer your questions, find anything that we can to help you with. So please stop in and see us.
And we've got a lot of fall stuff coming in. So no pumpkins yet, but beautiful mums and other containers and some decor. And we've got some things on sale.
Yeah.
So stop into the store because
Look forward to seeing you.
we're always excited to see you. So